everybody, and welcome to a special edition of Booking the Territory, the Professional Wrestling Podcast, where today we're finally talking to the one and only Dirty Dutch Mantell. We're going to talk to him about some Smoky Mountain days. If you're a patron of ours, you may be getting this a little bit early, and if you're a non-patron, no worries. We always put our podcasts out to everyone. So, Dutch, let me welcome you into to this show. We've had a number of people: Daryl Van Horn, Jimmy Cornette, Tracy Smothers, Les Thatcher, to name a few, have been a guest on our SMW pod. So, Dutch, we're done with Smoky Mountain and all of our reviews now. How you doing, man? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing good. So, how are you? I'm actually glad to be on your podcast. I don't listen to podcasts, but I read Twitter and I read what you guys write. And there's a lot of interest in, seem like, thanks to you and some more, podcasts, there's a lot of renewed interest in Smoky Mountain. And I've actually never been asked to do any podcast. I think I've been asked, but this is the first one I've ever done just concerning Smoky Mountain. I've done podcasts, but it usually took in my career or more WWE or WWF or WCW or, things like that. But this is the first one that I actually focused it strictly on Smoky Mountain. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, Dutch. It's funny you say that. Daryl Van Horn, James Mitchell, he's told me the exact same thing when he came on about 2 years ago. He said, I've talked about WCW a lot. I've talked about many other stories a lot, but he's like, this is the first time I'm able to really talk in depth about Smoky. And we had a lot of fun. So we're glad to have you. And Dutch, the people have been asking for you. It took us 3 years and 9 months to get through the entire Smoky Mountain run. The people have been wanting to hear from you the entire time. So I am gracious to have you. So let's get started, if that's okay with you.
Okay, let's run some questions by me.
All right. So, Dutch, I'm actually going to play this promo for you, and you let me know if you can hear it or not. But there was an infamous promo back in Smoky where Robert Fuller mentioned he had problems with the IRS and his women giving him trouble, but he wasn't going to do the Von Erich thing. And I kind of want to get your thoughts about that. I want to know if you knew it was coming. I want to know, and I think I know the answer, but I want to know that. And I just want to know your overall thoughts on this. Here, I'm going to play it for you. You should be able to hear the audio as it comes through right now.
Stay with a Quality Inn East. All right, fans, with us right now, the Stud Stable. What about the Bluegrass Brawl?
No, fellas, let me tell you something. Stay out of my face and hold the microphone up high, because Stud's gonna tell you, I got 15 women running around on me, IRS up my rear end, son. I got all kinds of problems, but I'm gonna guarantee you, son, I ain't gonna do the Von Erich thing. You know what I'm talking? No, I'm not, because I found out now that we got the match we've been waiting on. This is the one that puts everything.
Now, Dutch, you didn't look surprised when he hit that line, and we know back then stuff wasn't, scripted out. That was just Robert Fuller in all of his glory, because he used to cut great promos. Dutch, what do you remember about that moment in Smoky Mountain? That was actually episode 59 from March 13th of 1993.
Hey, when Robert did an interview, he didn't practice interviews. He says what he says at the moment. They could have wanted him to say something else, but he just, we didn't have scripted promos. We didn't have a writer handing us a piece of paper. All right, talk about this. That's what made the promos good. That was vintage Robert. What I would have, and I heard what he said, but I think it was in bad taste. And I thought maybe Jimmy would have edited that out, but he didn't. So, but I heard that promo the same time everybody else heard it. From the first time. And it is what it is. And I think that's one thing that made Smoky Mountain as good as it was, because it was just whatever was there, you got to see it, warts and all. So, and yeah, I was kind of, like I said, he was in bad taste to do that. But Robert run by it so fast, and I think Jimmy kind of noticed it too. And then when we went in the back, nobody ever said nothing, and it was just business as usual.
It was something. I as we reviewed that episode, that was the episode where Arn made his debut too in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, which was crazy at that. But Jimmy Golden looked up like, "Oh no, don't do that!" And then honestly, you just played it cool like you would normally do on any other promo. You kind of like, oh, you raised your eyebrow and hit a little, but it was something else. I will say this. Robert Fuller was something else when it came to his promos, and we loved his promos, not only in Smoky, but everywhere else. So I knew you knew it wasn't coming. I knew it wasn't scripted. I've actually heard Cornette talk about this promo, too. It was something else, though, back in the day. So
well, what did Cornette say about it? Did he think about trying to edit it out?
I don't. He didn't think about editing out, if I remember correctly, when he talked about it on his show. But he did say, I asked him the same question. Did you know it was coming? Obviously, I knew the answer to it. He didn't know it was coming. He just said, he was just one of those things. I kind of told Robert, gave him a bullet point and say, hey, kind of work this into your promo, and he said Fuller went out there and just did his thing. I mean, that's what Robert Fuller would do. I mean, if you watch any of his promos back in the day. So Jimmy did not know it was coming. Cornette, that is. Golden, I don't think knew it was coming either, although I've never asked him that. Just like you said, you didn't know it was coming. I'm sure Bob Caudle didn't either. But Cornette did not know it was coming. And I want to say when Cornette answered the question on his show,
you know who else didn't know it was coming?
The audience.
Robert.
Yeah,
Robert. He just said it. I swear to God, I guarantee you, he said it on the spur of the moment. That's what he said. And he didn't even, I bet he didn't even think at all before he went out there of saying that. But it came out that way. Well, and that was Robert.
And he was trying, the spirit of the promo was, he was complaining about the problems that, you all had right at that moment with the heavenly bodies and the rock and roll. And the spirit of the promo was, he was saying like, the IRS is on my rear end. My women are on my rear end. But with all that said and all those problems, I'm not going to, commit suicide. And it is a tasteless joke. I mean, obviously, look, we're in 2020 now, man. You do this nowadays, Lord knows what kind of pitchforks you'd have coming after you. But the point is, like, that's the emphasis he was trying to make. And to your point, I think he didn't know he was going to say it until it came out at that moment.
Yeah, well, he didn't know it. So,
yeah. Hey, what, Dutch? Do you, Robert Fuller? We love Robert Fuller in Smoky. Him and Jimmy Golden and you. There was an angle. It's one of our favorite angles that we reviewed when we did Smoky. Was the Stud Stable versus the Rock and Roll versus the Heavenly Bodies? Is there anything in your mind that sticks out from that feud that you have any good, any other good Robert Fuller stories from that moment and that time in Smoky Mountain? Because it was a really good feud between the three teams. You and Jimmy were friends, and then y'all kind of fell out because you sided with the Fuller, with Fuller and Golden, because they wanted a shot at the tag titles. It was really well done. You got any great memories from that feud at all?
Well, actually, most of my Smoky Mountain recollections, actually, I was more or less the color commentator most of that time. My wrestling there was limited to basically most of my wrestling I did there is when we did the angle with the Rock and Roll and the Midnight and the three-man teams but mostly my recollections of Smoky are mostly doing TVs and doing the voiceovers with Bob Caudle. Sometimes we would do almost 4 tapes in one night. And to try to go back in those hills of Virginia and West Virginia and do 3 tapes or 3 hours of TV wrestling, actually it was very, very taxing to get that done and to sit there. And I never went to a voiceover session with Bob Caudle. I mean, we were never called to Knoxville to a studio to voice over anything. If it wasn't done that night, it didn't get done. So we had one shot at it, and it was live. And of course, Jimmy took it back to the studio, and he tinkered with he would edit this out or edit this out. But I don't think that much was edited out of that show. From what I saw when I was sitting at the table and then watching it back, not a lot of editing was done on that show. I mean, as far as taking commentary out, and probably not a lot of taking just the actual wrestling footage out. It was what it was, and we put it together. It was as old school as it could get. You got what you got, and let's run with it.
As somebody with my co-host who has watched all 200 episodes of Smoky and the early stuff, obviously with you and Bob, I can say, you can tell usually when a match is kind of cut, and you can tell when there are edits made because, guys will end up in a different spot in the ring, even if it's just a second. You can tell. I can tell you, yeah, unless it was like the big shows, the Volunteer Slam or things like that, the, weekly TVs where you did the 3 to 4 tapings, you're absolutely right. Basically, whatever was put out there was what was put out there, and what you and Bob did. And you're right, you and Bob did a great job on commentary. I mean, you were the perfect yin to his yang, I guess is the words I'm looking for. You were the perfect spoil to him as you mess with Bob Cottle all the time. How was it working with Bob?
Oh, it was great. Bob was a great straight commentator.
Yes.
And I think what made us work is we never bickered. I would hold those signs up, and then Bob would say, "What was in that sign, Dutch?" And I'd say, "Nothing you'd be interested in, Bob," or something. And he always pretended not to know what the signs read, and he never alluded to them at all, which I think added to it. And I even took that. The sign gimmick, I even took it to WWE with me because I thought the sign gimmick was better than doing a promo. You could put on that sign, and they'll read the sign. And I'm a strong believer in let the fans decide what it means. I mean, you've heard of commentators say, "Well, this means this and this means that." I mean, these fans aren't stupid. And they can put their own meaning to anything. But I started doing those signs, and it took off. People liked it. It would be a stupid sign. One time I held a sign upside down.
Yeah.
And nobody ever told me I had the sign held upside down. So, people stopped the tape to back it up and then turn their head sideways to see what the sign said. And when I held the sign upside down, I didn't even know I had it upside down. And nobody told me, and we just hit run exactly like that. I mean, Smoky Mountain was just pure off the cuff. Hey, what was that? A series or whatever that WWE had? It was like a small Southern promotion, and it was like a. You know what I'm talking about?
Southpaw Regional Wrestling with the clips. Yeah.
I never saw that. Was that any good?
Well, it mocked basically Memphis, Smoky, Mid-South. It mocked all the great Southern territories. It's let
me say this. When they were mocking those Southern territories, because this is what and now you're from down south, right?
Oh, I'm from the deep South, New Orleans, Louisiana.
Well, there is a thing called. I call it geographical elitism. Because if you go up north and you have a Southern accent, I mean, they immediately, they judge you by that. And I think, especially New York and Vince, they judge Southern wrestling as being hick and really slow and backward, but they copy everything that Memphis did. Everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, let me say, well, that's that stupid Memphis stuff. And let them get to a point where they need something to boost a pay-per-view. And they weren't hesitant to steal anything that Memphis had done. And without apology, too. I mean, they would just take it. So to me, that told me, well, they'll knock it because they think they're better than what we did down south. People used to ask me, especially about Memphis wrestling, why did y'all do all those crazy angles? And why did you fight out in the crowd? And I said, because we goddamn needed to eat next week. That's why we did it. I mean, we were in these towns 52 weeks a year. We was in Memphis 52 Mondays in a row. And we may have missed a Monday every now and then. But when you go to a town over and over and over and over, not only do you got to give them a show on Monday night, you got to give them a trailer for next week. And then you got to do a TV and then continue that, then go back in there. Have a couple of bad shows and your house falls off to nothing. Now, see, you can do that in New York. How often did they run New York back in the old days? Every 6 weeks? That's how often they would run Madison Square Garden, every 6 weeks. They wouldn't run it every week. I guarantee you, if you had the WWF go into Madison Square Garden on a Monday night and have a show, and then come back the next Monday, let's say they draw 20,000 people. If they come back the next Monday, it'll be about 12,000. They come back the next Monday, they're down to 7,000. So it would probably bottom out at about 4,000 people. Because I've been in the garden with about 4,000 people in there. And believe me, you could shoot a shotgun off in that place in the middle of the ring and not hit anybody. So that's why we did. And I tell you when that was, when they brought in the Goon and they brought in, you remember that period in WWE?
I'm about to tell you, the Goon, T.L. Hopper,
yep. Right. And they brought all those guys in, put them on the show, and it just bombed. And I'm gonna say right now, what's wrong with WWE is how the old Southern territories used to operate, because we always told a story. We had a story that had a definite beginning. Then you had the middle part where the conflict was, and then you had a resolution to it, or a seeming resolution to it that wasn't the resolution, and then we went on down, and then we would go back and join it again. That's why we had to make things last in these southern territories, like Smoky Mountain, like Memphis, like Mid-South, like Florida, because you only had a set number of guys. If you really look at what WWE has now, they got like on the main roster, they got like 70 guys, 70 talents. Now, you cannot use 70 talents on a show. You just can't do it. I think the most you could probably use is 20 or 22, and that's a lot. But I don't know how you keep, and there is a thing too, having too many stories. But WWE, to me, right now, and I don't even watch it hardly anymore, they have no stories that interest me, and that's the problem. But they don't know. I don't think even Vince knows how to fix it. He knows the problems, but I think Vince is torn in so many ways. Plus, he's 74 years old. He's probably tired, and he tried to get Heyman and Pritchard to come in to help him, and it didn't work out too well for Paul, because I think Paul had a definite plan what he wanted to do, and Vince didn't like it, so he said, all right, well, we'll get somebody else. This business is not as simple as what it looks sometimes, but it is simple. It's a simple story that you got to carry out, and that's what Smoky Mountain did well. That's what Memphis did well. That's what Mid-South did well. They had stories, and the people knew what the story was about and how they wanted it to end.
I completely agree. I want to ask you one more question about the signs, and then I'm going to go to one of the angles in Smoky that I kind of that is will emphasize what you just explained clearly. You were talking about, but real quick, you were starting to talk, and we were talking about the signs for a minute with you and Bob, and that started around episode 30, maybe 40 of Smoky, where you were messing with Bob, where you were writing the signs to start the shows. Cornette, I asked him about this when he came on. I said, what did you think of the signs? And he kind of said some of what you just said. He's like, Dutch and Bob are going through these marathon TV tapings, 3 and 4 shows that we're doing. So, 4 hours in this little town. He's like, I think Dutch at first just did it to kind of entertain himself to start things off. Now, you kind of did say, it was a joke and kind of having some fun, and obviously it was your idea. Bob seemed to be a really good sport about the signs and what you were writing, even though they made fun of him. So if I heard you right, with those signs, he knew what was on them, but he sold it as if he didn't, which was great, honestly, Dutch, it was a great little snarky, funny way to kick off the shows, where it made you look like the heel that you were, and Bob Caudle was sympathetic because he's the straight man trying to call this, and here you are, being a clown and a buffoon.
Well, he knew what some of them said.
Okay.
I don't think he knew what all of them said. I don't think he cared, to tell you the truth. he knew it would be something that wouldn't. The only one that I ever had that, and I would make fun of Bob. I said, yes, that is Bob's real hair, whatever. Then I might say, don't adjust your set. It's just Bob or something like that. But yeah, and I did it and I would go up there and I'd have them bring me. I'd tell the production guy up there, I said, hey, have me about 4 or 5, poster boards, and I would make them up before the show and I'd take it out there. And he always never, and that's why I said that's what made Bob so good, is because we never argued, we never bickered. Bob would sometimes he just tolerated me. I remember he said one time, well, that's easy for you to say. How can you say that? I said, well, I don't know. I just say one word and then I put another word next to that one and I put another one and then it comes out. I don't know. How do you do it, Bob? And I had a great time because I love Bob Caudle. He's one of the easiest guys in the world to work with. Nothing phases him. He just sits there and, if a bomb blew up out there, he said, well, what was that? And we just continued to go on. But I always thought Bob was always like, to me, even when I was kind of growing up and listening to him in Mid-Atlantic, he's a perfect announcer. He was,
Yeah.
He didn't get overly excited. He just called the action, which is one thing I think that WWE commentators need to do, but they can't because of the system in the WWE. And I know this is about Smoky Mountain, but if you really look at the commentators, kind of, to me, I listen to them because those are the guys that you're hearing the most of on that show. If it's a 42-minute show, if you take out for interviews, it's really 30 minutes of hearing most of those commentators. You hear them the most. So they got to not only tell the story, but kind of lay out when it's time to lay out and then hop on it when it's hot. WWE, they don't do that. They're too busy pushing merch and pushing something on the network and doing something else and some special coming up on the network and the match. I don't care. Sometimes the match takes second place, but I think in Smoky Mountain, I think it was a good mix that we talked about the in-ring action, what was coming up, and we talked wrestling for an hour. The show was an hour, right? Smoky Mountain. I don't even remember now. It's an hour show, correct?
Yeah, well, 1 hour minus local promos and commercials.
So it adds up to really, and people never think of this, but really an hour show on TV really equals 42 minutes of actual content.
Right.
That's what Jimmy was obliged to provide on that show because, the TV, they had their spots and we're going to take this and this and this. We'll give you guys 42 minutes to get your stuff in. And that's what we ran with. So, and I forgot what the original question was, but that's my answer.
Well, no, I was just pointing out how Bob Caudle, you and Bob Caudle, and Dutch, I'm not just saying this. I've said this I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you now. Finally, I've said this for the entire run that you had with Bob as his color guy, color commentator. You and Bob are a very underrated commentary team because Bob Caudle is the perfect, in your own words, he's like the perfect straight guy. He doesn't, nothing rattles him. He kind of just calls what he's seeing in the ring. And then you would just do your thing that only Dutch Mantell can do. And I mean that sincerely, and I'll give you an example. There was an episode of Early Smoky where Robert Gibson is in the ring and you and Bob are on commentary and Bob's, he's calling the match, all right, Gibson hip toss. He went for an arm drag there and all right, he's got him in an arm lock or whatever. And then you tell Bob, did you hear about Robert Gibson's last album? It went sheetrock. And Bob Bob Caudle's not ready for it. Bob Caudle pops. He can't contain himself, Dutch. It's hilarious. He's trying with all his might, you can tell, but he kind of chuckles and then he gets back to it. But it's that little interplay where, you know, Bob is the perfect straight guy to your just debauchery at times, where you're just making fun of things. And the example you also gave where Bob's like, well, Dutch, how do you say that? How do you come up with that? And you're like, well, I just take one word and I put it after that word and then I put another word after that. That's what I'm talking about. You guys had the perfect chemistry. You guys were the perfect tandem in Smoky, and that's including Jim Ross and Les Thatcher, who were great. You and Bob were perfect. You were perfect together. And again, I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you.
Well, I appreciate that, and I did think we were good because it was easy. You know, when something is easy, it's a natural fit. And I never felt pressure with Bob. I don't think Bob felt pressure with me. And because I have seen announced partners go out there and try to outdo each other. I remember one time in WCW, they had Paul Heyman out there with Jim Ross. They literally almost got into a verbal match on TV trying to outdo each other. Do you remember what I'm talking about? It was Heyman was just starting out, and he was trying to be the smart-ass New Yorker, and I think he really irritated Jim on this program, and it kind of settled down after that because I don't know who got them together and told them to stop it, but it was actually distracting from the show. Bob and we would talk about the match. And if we threw a few gems in, I had forgotten saying that you hear about his latest album, it was Sheetrock. I had forgotten about that. Actually, I laughed about it when I heard it because I'd forgotten I'd said it. But it was things like that. And if you listen for that, I bet the people at home said, "What did he say?" But back in those days, you couldn't back the tape up. You either heard it, or you'd have to either tape it and go back and listen to it. But there was no stop the tape, back it up, what did he say? And I think that was one of the beauties of a Smoky Mountain. So I really enjoyed my time with Bob.
Yeah, there was another when Daryl Van Horn brought the Mummy in, and there's another great line where Bob Caudle was trying to call it straight. And I mean, he's struggling because it's a mummy, and you know, I mean, even Cornette has said the mummy was a joke, and Bob Caudle's like, looks like he needs a vacuum or something, Dutch. And he pops you're just kind of stuck. Just like, I can't believe I'm calling this mummy match. But I mean, look, and I point the mummy out because I mean, how do you call that? But you guys did it. You called it right. And I don't know. There was just such great interplay with you and Bob. I had to ask you because I hold Bob in the highest regard. He's a legendary announcer, and I don't know if he gets his just due from the people that know, but mainstream wrestling fans nowadays he doesn't.
Who was the guy? And I know who he is, but what is his name? Rick Rubin. Oh, Rick Rubin. You know, the whole time I was at Smoky Mountain, I never knew of Rick Rubin's involvement. Never knew it.
I believe that because I've heard Cornette. Cornette has said that a bunch of times, like how most of the guys never knew throughout the run, or they found out at the very end. So I believe it, and because you left, I forget the episode number, but by the time you left, yeah, I don't think nobody knew at that point. So it makes sense that you would not have known. Again, I think most of the guys didn't know until the very end, or many of them.
I was in Los Angeles with WWE during my last run there, which was my final run there. And somebody told me that later on in the night that Rick Rubin was there and he wanted to meet me. I never met the guy. And he wanted to meet me because he got the tape every week and he was a big fan and he enjoyed it. And he wanted to meet me, but then he had to leave. I had to leave. And I missed meeting him. So I really wanted to meet him. But I never knew that he was the money guy at all. Nobody knew. And I did 100. I think I did 104 shows with Smoky Mountain.
Yeah, that sounds right. I can remember.
Half their existence, right? That was 2 years, I think.
Yeah.
I did 100, maybe It was around that number, maybe right under 100 or something. And I used to get the tape every week, and I'm not a tape watcher. I mean, I'm not a podcast listener. I just don't do it. I don't know why, but I never watched the tape because I'd already voiced it over one time, and I wasn't going to listen to it to critique my work or Bob's work, because once it's done, it's done. You can't go back and redo it. So sometimes I don't listen to it in case I do make a mistake, which I made probably 10,000. So if we were going back and correcting what I said, we'd be there all night. But like I said, I enjoyed my time there. And some of those, I used to make fun of some of those towns. I said, some of these people never leave these towns up here. And Mom said, well, why do you say that, Dutch? I said, because
it's true.
They can't read a McNally Road map. Hell, and we would go back, I swear, you would get dizzy on those turns. And you go this way, and then you go that way. And, I've almost gotten sick in some of those West Virginia hills and those mountains because there's such windy roads. And it wasn't too bad in the spring, summer, and early fall, but then it got cold weather, and then the roads would be icy and slippery, and I'm thinking, what moron would book this place up here? I mean, and I used to say I don't know where they get these towns. I used to say this in Memphis. I said, I think they sit back with a dartboard, and they throw a dart at this map, and wherever it lands, that's where we're going to. I used to make a joke in Memphis. I said, we went to this town. It didn't draw worth no crap. It was like 50, 75 people there. I remember making a statement, maybe you should book some towns where some people live, maybe, so they can actually come to this stuff. I said, there's nobody here. And I used to make a joke we didn't have GPS back in the day. We had a Ram McNally Road map. And then you pull into a town. Say you're supposed to be in some town. It's supposed to be at the high school, whatever. And then you pull in, and this is your first indication you were going to bomb. You would pull in there, and you'd go into 7-Eleven or some convenience store, and you say, hey, where's the wrestling at tonight? And they say, wrestling? Say wrestling? He said, yeah, that's what I said. I ain't heard no wrestling here. You knew right then you're going to bomb. And, of course, I was never wrong. You go to high school, and he'd never heard about it. Nobody else heard of it either, and nobody came. So, and that's always it's always great to drive 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours to go to an event, to a show, and have about 100, 150 people show up. And it's bombs. So, and everybody is in any type of entertainment has done that. Bands, unless you're just a top name, especially wrestling, you go in these towns sometimes. Sometimes I've been on some shows, the wrestlers, if we had a riot, the wrestlers would have to help the fans because we had them outnumbered. So, and that's why when I watch WWE now, and I see no fans out there in the crowd. Well, hell, that's nothing new. Guys like me, hell, I've done that a lot of times. I wrestled one time, and this is when I first started out. I think there were like 8 or 10 fans out there, and I think like 3 or 4 of them are family. So that's nothing new for me.
I've been at a show once, Dutch, where there was like 6 people. And that's all I'll say.
It's happened.
Yeah.
And I asked the promoter one time, there was nobody out there. I said, why don't you just give them the money back? Let's go home. No, They paid for it. And this is what I hated to do it. Oh, yeah, the crowd is down. And it's not very good. And some guys would go out there. And it's really hard to get motivated for no people. Now, WWE, you get motivated because you're getting big money.
Yeah.
You better go out there and you better bust your butt because, see, their money is coming in off that TV money. Our money back in the day, we only had 2 sources of revenue from the wrestlers. You know, you get paid off the gate. You get paid off live attendance. If it wasn't there, you didn't get paid.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you were a good guy, you could go sell a few gimmicks, T-shirts, or some photos. But if you were a bad guy, you're just screwed.
Yeah.
Because at least that was what I ran on in Memphis a lot of times was just what I call my gimmick money. That's what I ran on. I made more money off my gimmick money than I did working. And a lot of guys would tell you that. Rock and roll will tell you that.
Oh, yeah.
They made their money off their pictures, off their T-shirts, off their gimmicks. That's how they made their money.
Yeah, I've talked to
and promoters
Tracy Smothers.
Promoters were smart. Yeah, promoters were smart to let those guys do that because that took some of the pressure off them to pay these guys what they needed.
Absolutely. Tracy
you said
Smothers.
You talked to who? Tracy?
Tracy. Tracy's been on the show 2 or 3 times, and I was talking to him in person actually last year. He was at a show in New Orleans that I went to, and we were talking about the gimmick sales and Smoky and how he talked about it like he was like, man, I was doing really good. I mean, obviously Jimmy can only afford so much on the pay for the night, but when it came to my merch table, he's like, I was doing great. Speaking of Tracy, I got to ask you a question about Ron Wright. Dutch, in fairness, we weren't exposed to Ron Wright until we watched and reviewed Smoky. Ron Wright is a fascinating figure in professional wrestling, a tremendous heel manager. This guy is just, he's gold on the mic. It's hard to explain. Earlier you were talking about the angles and telling a story. The story he and Tony Anthony told when they denounced their Southern heritage and became Yankees in Smoky Mountain was great. You have any good stories maybe you've never told, or maybe you've told and I just haven't heard about Ron Wright? Because I really love Ron Wright.
Well,
I think he is underrated.
Well, Ron and Don Wright were legends in East Tennessee, and I wasn't exposed to them as a kid. I was exposed to them later on when I started. And I worked in Knoxville for a while with Ron Fuller, and he had Ron and Don around, I think, at the time. And I just heard stories, more or less. I mean, these guys would go in towns, and they were just walking the heat. I mean, if you hear them talk, they're really, really Southern. They were more Southern than those people up in the hills. And when they did an interview, to me, they were, like you said, they were gold because people actually hated those guys. I mean, they've had more riots, and I don't know which one. I think it was Ron in some town. And this used to be a serious, serious problem with wrestlers, is because you want heat, but you don't want that type of heat, what they call killing heat, and that's what they got. I think Don, was it Ron? It was the one that was cut by the guy cut him with a knife.
Yeah. Actually,
that's Ron, right?
Ron Fuller and Bo James have both. Yeah. Ron Fuller and Bo James have both told me that story. Ron Fuller was there, Bo James wasn't, but Bo was telling me Ron Wright told him the story. Ron Fuller told me the story about the night he got sliced with a blade in the back and almost died.
Yeah. Well, it could happen. And this is one of the old stories that if you tell young guys today, they look at you like, get the F out of here. That shit didn't happen. The hell it didn't. I mean, there were a few hot spots in the wrestling profession where you had to be careful about how much hell. If you related back today, WWE guys can't get any heat. I was sitting in the dressing room one time. I was sitting in the dressing room one night, and I just offhandedly made a comment. I went, guys, I can get more heat walking the ring and stand in the corner and get more heat than you guys can working for it. Oh, that got over like a lead balloon. Oh, they got hot because they don't know what heat is. But he went into these right boys. They go in the ring, and they would have to hold their work down to keep the crowd from rioting. They would have them in their. That's how they affected fans. I don't. It's even hard to imagine now anybody getting so mad in the crowd to actually attack someone. But there it was sort of what they had done. And of course, it all depends on, well, why can't, this is what wrestlers don't understand. I don't think the WWE guys understand. Oh, you can take a guy in the ring and have him win week after week after week after week. Well, what is there to dislike about this guy? If he's not, that's what they did with Bray Wyatt. He just won and won and won, but nobody give a shit because he never did anything to anybody that they really cared about. So if you wanted heat to Smoky Mountain, you just have to beat up Ricky, because they cared about Ricky Morton. So therefore, they want Ricky to exact revenge on you. That's how you get heat. If you beat up somebody they don't care about, the guy that got beat up gets more heat than the heel does, because they're thinking, well, he shouldn't went in there and knew he was going to get his ass beat, so there's no heat. And I think some people apparently have forgotten that in the course of time. But back to Ron and Don Wright, legends, absolute legends. Now, Ron's passed away, right? Or both of them passed away?
Ron has passed away. I believe Don, as of us recording this, is still living.
And they were always super nice to me, super nice. And if you look at Ron and Don Wright, even back when they were wrestling, they never had muscular bodies, really. And that was part of their heat, because every guy in that crowd thought that he could whip Don and Ron's ass. That was part of it. But anyway, they had a lot of heat. They're legends, and you'd never seen them before Smoky Mountain, right? You said.
Yeah, I grew up a Mid-South fan. We got world class in our area, but even then, I never saw Ron Wright. So when Cornette put Ron Wright on air and he's in the wheelchair and he's just gold getting that heat in the wheelchair, and then he ends up in the feud with Tracy Smothers, and Ron Wright and Tony Anthony, Dirty White Boy, denounce their Southern heritage and they become Yankees. They actually burn the flag, the Confederate flag, in the middle of the ring, and my God, Tracy, they beat Tracy, they tie him up to the ropes. It's just storytelling. It was just gold. And Ron Wright talking about the hillbillies in the area and how he had to go up north to get a northern doctor to fix his cataracts because the dumb doctors in the South couldn't do it. And it's just, Dutch, it's lost. Nobody does this anymore. And it's a shame because the WWE owns darn near every library. It's like, look, you got the encyclopedia, you got the Holy Grail at your fingertips, and you don't use it. It's a shame. And I look at a guy like Ron Wright, and I'm like, there's so much that a young wrestler or a young manager could learn from him or a Tony Anthony, and nobody does it. And that's what amazes me about, I know you in your reference in WWE a lot. I think it was a blessing for the young guys that you got to meet up there so that you could tell some of those stories. Like I've heard Swagger talk about his time with you up there. That guy, he's young. He's much younger than me, and I'm young, but he would have never heard those stories like for you to share, and they need that, but they don't have that. They don't have a guy like Ron Wright. It's not that they don't have it. None of those guys know of guys like Ron Wright, and that's the tragedy. And I shouldn't say tragedy because that's technically not, but that's the unfortunate part of wrestling.
It is a tragedy because WWE guys, they only know one system.
Yes.
The WWE system. They don't know anything else. I even volunteered one time. I said, why don't you take a few of these writers and why don't you let us on Mondays and Tuesdays? Why don't you put me with them? And I don't know why I said this, because I didn't really want to be with them. I said, let them learn a little history. And they went, oh, no. Vince, he doesn't want them riding with any of the guys. And I don't know why.
Wow.
Because they knew absolutely nothing about the history of the business. I asked the writer there one time, I said, where did you work before? He said, the Poughkeepsie Daily Journal News Gazette or something. I said, well, the Poughkeepsie, he said the Journal Daily News, something, Gazette or something. And I said, listen, I'm not trying to be a smart ass, but I says, being a reporter for the Poughkeepsie Daily News Journal Gazette does not a wrestling writer make. And he said, what's that mean? And I said, well, think about it. And I left. I let him think about it. But see, those guys there, they write, and you've heard this before. They write, and even the producers, they actually write and produce for an audience of one. And if Vince doesn't like it, he screams, and he doesn't really scream at the wrestlers so much, but he screams at he just raises hell back in the back rooms back there. See, when I would go to a WWE show, the first climate you try to find out about is what kind of mood Vince is in. Because then you know how the show's going to go. If the writers were kind of loose and laughing, that meant one or two things. Vince is in a pretty good mood, or he's not there. But if you looked in that writer's room and they're like gnashing their teeth and pulling their hair, Vince is on a warpath. And that was kind of my barometer for how the night was going to go. Because if those writers were testy and nervous and jumpy, you knew something was wrong in the back. Because Vince has been known to go to the meetings and just tear the whole show up and rewrite it on the spot. So he's like that.
Amazing.
But those guys in WWE, they know, especially now, they know very little what preceded them in this business, nor do they care to know, most of them. They just don't care to know. See, when I came along, I would hear these stories about something happening here, something happening there, years and years ago, and that's how I learned the business. But I think WWE now, they want them to know one thing. They want them to know WWE, the WWE story, and nothing else. They don't care about Smoky Mountain. They don't care about Memphis. They don't care about Florida or Continental. They don't care about that. And they may now, the WWE has all the libraries, but they don't want them to know, because they want them to know one system, the WWE system, and that's all they need to know. And in if you really look at it, yeah, that's a good thought. But nothing wrong with knowing where the business came from. I got a little saying, you have no idea where you're going unless you know where you've been. And these guys don't know where they've been. And I think the writers don't know. And I asked a writer one time, listen, have you ever been in a fight? He went, no. I went, well, goddamn. How in the hell can you write about a fight if you've never actually been in one? Oh, well, you could do this, you could do that. I said, well, yeah, you could. And they did a lot of things that I don't agree with. Like calling two guys in the middle of the ring, and they're in the middle of a feud, and all of a sudden nothing breaks out. So where does that happen? Two guys meet on the street corner. Let's say they meet on the street corner in real life, and they're mad at each other, and they just going to stand there and promo. No, they're going to fight.
Dutch.
Another thing I don't understand in WWE, when they all get fighting, and all of a sudden guys don't come from the back and help out. Funny, the bad guys have more friends than the good guy does. Good guys getting beat, they'll just leave him laying. And which, if I was on commentary, I said, well, he don't have no friends. I probably wouldn't be on commentary very long. But it's little things like that to me just distorts the whole image.
Well, most of your territory wrestling was only an hour in length, so most, not all, obviously. I mean, Saturday night on TBS was 2 hours, and you had other shows that were more than an hour. But it's funny when you say that, because I tell my co-host and we always talk about it, and we brought it up a lot during our run with Smoky, because we would say like how when guys have heat, they may flap their gums for 30 seconds to 60 seconds or so as they're like, getting irritated with each other. But nobody's out there for 15 minutes cutting a promo on each other. If you got that much heat and dislike for somebody, if you've ever been in a real fight, it's you better back up. Look, I'm gonna knock your block off, and that might be one of the only things you say. You're not sitting out there for 10, 15 minutes, yada 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 yada. It's just, that's not realistic. That's, like you said with that writer, that's not how a real fight works. That's not how people who don't get along work.
Well, if they got this hot feud going on, and they go out there and they start talking, they actually talk themselves out of it.
Right.
People say, well, people get, if you're going to fight. If you don't, I don't hear you bump your gums. Let's see
right.
What's going on. And I've seen a lot of times, and if you actually saw two people on the street and they're yapping, you'll find and it's serious, and they have fought before. Eventually, if they're just going to argue, I swear to God, and I've done this, I just turn and walk off. I said, hell, they're not going to fight.
Yeah.
Because if they were going to fight, they would have fought in the first 2 minutes. But if they're not, and they're going to sit there back and forth, hell with it. I'm going to leave it. I got to do something. But they don't see that. And I think sometimes they outsmart themselves, I think. But it's not my company. They can do what they want to do, and I wish them success. Because they treated me well. I love Vince. I love WWE. Because they, when they came along, and you're talking about, I was just talking a while ago about the history of the business. When I walked into, and I want to tell the story, when I got hired by WWE in 2013, and I can't remember the day, February 11th or something, they were coming to Nashville, and they wanted me to come down and talk to them, because that's where I was living then. I said, yeah. So I went down there, and I literally thought that they wanted to talk to me about NXT and being an instructor there. But then I walked in about 3:30 in the afternoon, and the head of talent relations met me, and he took me to Triple H. But Triple H wasn't talking then about going to NXT. He was talking about getting a mouthpiece for Swagger. They wanted to do something with it. So, and that was at like 4:30. And then he wanted me to cut a promo so they could play at the events later that night. And they wanted me to cut this promo to show him. So I did that at 5:30. Then they come back at 6:30 and told me I was hired, and they wanted me to be on the show that night. And at 7:30, I walked out live on Raw. That's how quick it was. Went down at 3:30, talked to Triple H 4:30, cut the promo at 5:30, got hired at 6:30. At 7:30, I walked out on Raw.
You were a seasoned. You were a seasoned pro, Dutch.
They give me. Well, they told me, said, well, we're looking for a guy for Swagger, and we want a guy who's a little bit older, and a little guy who's like been around on the bed and has grown like disillusioned with the way the country is going. It was like Tea Party stuff, and they thought of me. So, and I went in there and I cut the promo, and I've said this before. You've seen the movie Gran Torino?
Yes.
Well, that's what I based the character on. Actually, Clint Eastwood. Because they give me about 10 minutes to think about the promo. They didn't tell me what to say. They said, well, you do it. And I'm thinking, well, damn. Why didn't you give me a little more time to think about it? I mean, I didn't tell them that, and they wanted me to do it. Well, and I'm thinking that, well, wouldn't you have a writer write this? You write everything else, and all of a sudden, I got a job hanging out here, and all of a sudden you want me to come up with something. But I came up with the Zeb Colter character right there, and I said, "We the people," and Vince saw it, and he said, usually he says, "You're fired." But this time he said, "You're hired." But the point I was trying to make, when I walked in that dressing room and talking about guys not knowing the history of the wrestling business, 75 to 80% of their talent had absolutely no idea who I was. Two of them did, but most of them, Jack didn't even know who I was. He said he heard the name. That's all he said, that's all I knew about you.
In Dutch, that's
So,
7 years ago. That's 7 years ago. So imagine now, 2020. I mean, people would know you from your run then, but guys who weren't even, they let's say you got a 20-year-old guy who wasn't even watching it back then, and now even if they hear Dutch Mantell, like I remember my son, I was watching Smoky one day on TV and on YouTube on the television. I was streaming it there, and he looked up and he saw you, and he's like, "That's Zeb Colter." And I said, "No, that's actually Dutch Mantell." But anyway, there's no way. I mean, they wouldn't know.
Nope, they didn't know, and I even had a few come up and ask me. I think they thought that I'm going outside here a second. As soon as I started doing the podcast, and my sister and my granddaughter, they all came in there. But they have no idea what's the history, and that's why I say if you don't know where you've been, how do you know where you're going?
Amen.
No idea.
None.
So
I'm with you, Dutch, on that one. Hey, Dutch, I know we've been going a little long, and I really appreciate your time. I got two more quick questions for you about Smoky.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure you saw it because you retweeted it on Twitter a couple times. I've tagged you in a few of the infamous Tim Horner promos in Smoky. What did you think of old Tim Horner and his promo skills in Smoky Mountain Wrestling? And I remember the one where you said, "I don't care if you get him as long as you don't get me." How was Tim on? What did you think of Tim's promos in Smoky?
Well, I actually felt for him because he struggled.
Yeah.
And he's trying to, he was, and you can tell the guy's struggling. And I tried to help him out as much as I could, but it was his promo. And I was just hoping he could get through it because, like I said, we didn't reshoot anything. Whatever he said, like Robert Fuller, by rights, we should have, we were talking earlier, maybe we should have reshot that or at least been edited. But Tim, I remember the one you're talking about, I said, I don't care who you get as long as you don't get me. That was the high spot of the interview, to tell you the truth. that kind of saved it. But he struggled, and he's just not a good talker. And some guys can talk, some guys can't. Some guys can make stuff up on the spot, some guys can't. Tim was one of those who was actually a really, really good, really good in the ring. But he just his verbal skills was lacking. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I've said it on the show a bunch. We've been hard on Tim. In fairness, we've because his promos. I mean, you said it, Dutch. I mean, he in that promo he actually said, "Slap me, get me in the mood, if you know what I mean." And then you followed that up at the end was, "I don't care if you get him as long as you don't get me." And that was the best part of it. We were hard on Tim's promos, but to your point, we'll give him credit. I mean, he was good in the ring. I mean, you can't knock Tim Horner as far as being in the ring. It was the promos that there was a struggle though. So, but yeah, old Tim Horner, and I got to give you some credit there. You brought that promo to life at the end after he couldn't get through it. It was 2 minutes of badness, and then Dutch hit him with the 2-second line of greatness. Hey, Dutch, what did you think? You were there when Kevin Sullivan, quote unquote, sliced Wing Kanemura's arm open. What did you think about that night? That was actually the same taping as the Robert Fuller, Von Erich thing promo. Do you remember that night well? And what did you think about the young man?
Well, I don't think it was the same night. I really don't.
Okay,
I remember it was a
it
different setup on the guy.
Okay.
What's his name? Kanemura or something? What was his name?
I think it was Wing Kanemura.
What was the guy? And I'm outside. That's why you're hearing that car.
No
I
problem.
Just went outside. But I thought it was. I didn't get it. I don't see. They didn't really shoot that for Smoky Mountain. You know that, right? They shot it for Japan.
Yeah, because they ended up. I believe him and Sullivan had like some follow-up matches in Japan, based off of that, right?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
But see, this is. He didn't even bleed that much. It was just a cut, and a horrible cut, by the way. And I'm thinking, I don't think I want to be around these guys like that if anybody's going to do that. But, and of course, they etched it out on TV, and it's supposed to be, and it was bad. And what did I think about it? I tried not to think about it too much, to tell you the truth. I didn't get it. And because I've never really been, I love this business, but at a point, you know, I'm only going to go so far with it. That guy who did it, he loved the business and wanted to be a young Japanese guy. And if he wants to do that, I mean, that's his business. And I don't know if it drew anything in Japan or not. I don't know. I have no idea. I didn't much care for it because I think it can be too graphic. See, why wrestling used to do well, and I talk about this all the time, is because we drew kids and we drew women. That's what we did the sellouts. The ECW, that's why they really couldn't go in a really big building because it had, and I've never heard anybody else say this about ECW. They say, "Oh yeah, man, it was hardcore, man." But see, women don't want to be around that hardcore stuff. It turns them off. You can't bring kids around that hardcore stuff because, you know, the parents don't want them to see it. And that's why I learned this a long time ago. Wrestling has to appeal to the general population. It's got to appeal to kids. And that's why you always saw like a little comedy act on shows. It has to appeal to the women. That's why you had your good-looking guys. And it had to appeal to your tough guys because now you're drawing all those aspects of the population into that building. But if it's just all hardcore and guys getting the crap beat out of them, well, kids can't identify with that. They don't want to see it. Women don't identify it because they'll stay away. That's why your ECW shows, if you look out there, you can count the women on one hand. And most of them are probably wrestling in the ring. So, but Memphis did that, and I think Smoky Mountain up to a degree. I know Continental did it, and Mid-South did it. And their business was good for years until Vince got a hold of it and kind of rearranged the whole aspect of the wrestling federation by drawing all these smaller territories out of business. And this, which leads me to another part. When he ran all the smaller territories out of business by taking over, what he did, he actually killed his own feeder system, is what he did. Now,
yes,
where are these guys going to train? Where are they going to go? Where's he going to find them? That's why he had to invent his own developmental system in NXT. So, and that's what he did. But for a couple of years there was no new talent coming along because he had actively forced all his little regional competitors, and they weren't even competitors really, but he had forced them out of business. And I think one day he sat up and said, "Wow, where am I going to get talent these days?" So he has to develop it himself. That's why I'm saying, that's why these guys coming along now in the WWE developmental system, they only know one system. They know WWE, and unless they're tape watchers like you, excuse me, they know nothing of the Ron Wright and the Don Wrights and the Dutch Mantell, and they know about Lawler, you know, because he's in a different stratosphere. He's all over WWE and has been for like 20 years. They know him and the Bill Dundees and even the Robert Fullers. They don't know those guys. So if they're going to try to model themselves after somebody, they're going to have to model themselves after somebody who's already in the system. Say a Daniel Bryan. Well, they already got a Daniel Bryan. AJ Styles. They already got an AJ Styles. So to me, if you're a wrestler, or you're an aspiring wrestler, I'm going to give you a hint. Go and study the old tapes and study the old characters they had. And if you can find something, I guarantee you that WWE doesn't have, and there's about probably 80% of the old time gimmicks that used to be out there, that would work today. I'm saying they would work today, but I don't know, since you have writers who've never been in the fight. I don't know what's going to work today. That's why I'm concerned about the wrestling business, because I don't know if the writers, I don't know. I could talk for days on it, but it's according to what kind of mood Vince is in on the day they present it to him and what kind of mood the writers are in. And of course, like I said, they write for an audience of one. And when they take it in there for him to look at it, and he'll look at it and he'll go, okay, adjust some things on it. He may not even tell them what to adjust. So, working for Vince and trying to get his approval on something is probably not the easiest job in the world. And it may be rewarding financially, but I don't know. I don't know if I can do that.
I hear you, Dutch. I don't know if I'd want to work for him just based on the stories I hear from people. Definitely doesn't seem like it'd be my thing. But Dutch, I really appreciate your time, and thank you for coming on the show. We've been wanting to have you on for a very long time, so we appreciate you coming on, enlightening us about your little bit of your time in WWE, but also talking some territory stuff and mainly some Smoky Mountain Wrestling. We really appreciate it. Dutch, please tell the people where to find you on social media and tell them about your podcast, The University of Dutch, and where to find all that and good stuff. If you want to go ahead and do that now, we'd appreciate it.
Well, I got a podcast called The University of Dutch. You can find that on, I forgot the name of it now. Look
MLW.
for it. Go to my, it's MLW. And
Yeah.
I can't even give you the address on it. But what is the address of it?
I'm looking up the actual address right now for you.
And I got a website, dirtydutchmantell.com. You can go there. And that might be up and might be down, but I usually put a different blog up like every week or every couple of weeks. And it's just a different story. You can find me on Twitter at Dirty D Mantell, or Dirty Dutchman 1 on Twitter. And you can find me on Instagram, Dirty Dutchman 1. You can find me there. And, but I was gonna bring something up. I've been hit on the head so many times, I can't even remember my name sometimes. But, and sometimes on my website, I do put up some things that I'm selling, and they're like, they're one of a kind. Have you ever seen one of these? I got this in a swag bag, I think at WrestleMania 29 in New Jersey. And have you ever seen those big cloaks they put over football players on the sidelines?
Yes.
You ever seen those?
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
I got one of those, and it says WWE on the back. And I don't know how I got it. I got it in one of my swag bags. And I'm looking at it, I said, I've never seen this before. And it's not even on the WWE website, one of those cloaks. So I finally called up he was like the head merch guy. I knew him pretty well when I was in WWE. And I asked him, I said, what is this? He said, well, these cloaks were only 25 made. And he said it was just for WrestleMania 29 because it was outside and they may have bad weather. He said, we only made 25 of them, and we give them to the talent. And I think they'll be getting ready to use them that night, I think. But it was good weather, so they didn't use it. I don't know how I ended up with it, but I got it. And if anybody is interested, you can email me at dirtydutchmantell@gmail with 2 L's, Mantell with 2 L's, dirtydutchmantell@gmail.com. But this would, for a collector, only 25 made, and I have never, ever seen an item like that before. That's what interested me in it. Because, if only 25 made, there's 24 more out there, but I don't know who would have them. And I would say that's almost like one of a kind, I think. But if anybody's interested in it, give me a call. And because I think it would be, for a collector, and I've learned about collectors. Somebody said, well, what do you think it's worth? I have no idea what it's worth. It's worth how much money you can get somebody to give you for it. That's what it's worth, because the market will set the value. If you don't want to sell it, don't sell it. But a collector, this is how they deal. Well, what do you got? Yeah, but do you have this? Oh, no, but do you have this? And they try to one-up each other. And this would be one that a collector could say, well, you don't have one of these, and show it off. So I'm kind of proud of myself, but I'm not a collector. Yeah, I'm a type guy. I need to get rid of stuff, just move stuff out of the way. Because, you know, when I was going through my storage room the other night, it's like discovering a foreign country somewhere. I don't know what the hell is back in that room. It surprised me. But anyway, hey, I've seen your podcast. I've never listened to it, but I've seen it, you know, on Twitter and people have talked about it. Glad I can make your show. And I haven't done a lot of podcasts about Smoky Mountain, but I think it is one of the unspoken gems of this profession because of the way it's made, and I think it's almost a crash course in professional wrestling. And I think I've worked for a couple of companies that I think that were great at what they did. Of course, one was Memphis. One was the Continental was great. Smoky Mountain was great. Florida was good, and Mid-Atlantic. But they're all Southern territories. And I worked Texas just briefly, but that's how we used to make our money, and it wasn't anything like it was today. So appreciate being on your show, and if you can see fit, well, you're through with Smoky Mountain now, so but if you want me back on, just give me a call.
I will, Dutch. And real quick, Dutch, hang tight after I hit the stop on this thing. I want to give the people, though, your site. So you can find Dutch's podcast. Just search University of Dutch pretty much wherever you get your podcast from, whether that's Podcast Addict, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, iTunes, all that good stuff. University of Dutch is the podcast. Or you can go to uofdutch.libsyn.com, and Libsyn is spelled Libsyn. So that's Dutch's podcast's website. But again,
now you know why I couldn't remember it. That Libsyn threw me off.
Yeah.
So anyway, and hey, one more thing, I am now offering diplomas from the University of Dutch. So,
yeah.
And you will receive a PhD in the fine arts of wrestling. And it's signed by the president of the college, that's me, Dirty Dutch, and also the chairman of the board, which is Colter. You get 2 autographs and a diploma to hang on your wall. I think it's a good deal.
It's a great deal. So everybody get in touch with Dutch out there. But no, Dutch, thank you again. Really appreciate your time. I'm gonna hit the stop on this thing and hang tight, Dutch. I gotta holler at you for one other second about something. But other than that, Dutch, I appreciate it, and thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you.